The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the marble-floor hallway of Sterling, Cross and Associates. The prestigious law firm felt different at night, stripped of its daytime authority and left with only shadows and silence. His 12-year-old daughter, Emma, sat cross-legged on the leather couch in the waiting area. Homework spread across the coffee table like a small, academic empire. Marcus had been bringing Emma to work during school breaks for the past 2 years, ever since his mother-in-law moved to Florida and could no longer babysit. The night shift paid better than day work, and the lawyers never minded a quiet child who did her homework and fell asleep on the couch by 10. The phone rang sharp and urgent, cutting through the building's quiet hum. Marcus glanced up from polishing the conference room table, watching Emma's head lift from her math workbook. The phone rang again, insistent. Emma looked toward her father, who nodded permission. She had answered the firm's phones before when they rang during cleaning hours, usually wrong numbers or automated calls. "Hello, Sterling, Cross and Associates," Emma said in her most grown-up voice. The man on the other end spoke rapidly, his words tumbling over each other with practiced urgency. "This is Attorney Johnson calling about Mrs. Victoria Ashford's emergency trust modification. We need her here first thing tomorrow morning to sign the amended documents. There are significant tax implications if we delay even one day." Emma frowned, twirling the phone cord around her finger. Her father had taught her to pay attention to details, and something about the caller's voice felt wrong. Too rushed, too pushy for the careful, measured way the real lawyers of the firm spoke. "Which Mrs. Ashford?" Emma asked innocently. "We have several clients with that last name." The caller paused, and Emma could hear papers rustling. "Victoria Ashford, the widow. The trust established after her husband's death last year. Surely you have her file readily available." But Emma knew Mrs. Ashford came in every few weeks, always impeccably dressed and always kind enough to ask about her schoolwork. She remembered Mrs. Ashford mentioning that her husband had died 3 years ago, not 1. "I think there might be some confusion," Emma said politely. "Could you call back tomorrow when the regular staff is here?" The caller hung up abruptly, leaving Emma staring at the phone with a puzzled expression. She set the receiver back in its cradle and looked across the waiting area to where her father was methodically cleaning the conference room windows. "Dad, that was weird," Emma called out, her voice echoing slightly in the empty office space. Marcus paused his cleaning and walked over to his daughter, settling into one of the leather chairs beside the couch. His work uniform was neat despite the late hour, and his hands, though calloused from years of cleaning work, moved with the careful precision of someone who paid attention to details. "What kind of weird, sweetheart?" he asked, giving Emma his full attention the way he always did when something troubled her. Emma tucked her legs under herself, abandoning her math homework completely. "This man called about Mrs. Ashford, the nice lady who always asks about my school projects. He said he was a lawyer and that she needed to come in tomorrow morning for some emergency trust thing." Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. He had learned to trust Emma's instincts over the past 2 years. She had an unusual ability to notice when things didn't fit together properly, a skill that had served them well in their new life as a team. "He said her husband died last year, and they needed to fix tax problems," Emma continued, frowning as she worked through the details. "But Mrs. Ashford told me her husband died when I was in 4th grade. That was 3 years ago, not 1. And he was really pushy about her coming in first thing tomorrow." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Before his wife's illness had changed everything, before he had chosen the night janitor position to be present for Emma, he had spent 15 years investigating corporate fraud. The pattern Emma described triggered instincts he had thought buried. "What else did he say?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice taking on a focused quality that Emma recognized as her father's serious thinking voice. "He knew her name and that she was a widow, but when I asked which Mrs. Ashford, he had to look it up, like he was reading from something." Emma paused, then added, "The real lawyers here never have to look up client information when they call. They just know it." The next morning arrived with unusual commotion at Sterling, Cross and Associates. Marcus had finished his night shift, but lingered in the supply closet, organizing cleaning materials while Emma gathered her homework from the waiting area. The familiar rhythm of lawyers arriving for their day was disrupted by sharp, agitated voices from the main entrance. Victoria Ashford swept through the glass doors like a woman carrying the weight of urgent decisions. Her silver hair was perfectly arranged despite the early hour, but her usual composed demeanor showed cracks of anxiety. She approached the reception desk with quick, determined steps. "I received 3 more calls this morning," Mrs. Ashford announced to the receptionist, her voice carrying across the lobby. "They insist I must sign these trust modifications today or face severe tax penalties." The caller said Attorney Johnson needed to see me immediately. Marcus stepped quietly from the supply closet, his cleaning uniform marking him as invisible to the morning's legal proceedings. Emma looked up from stuffing her backpack, recognizing Mrs. Ashford's voice with immediate concern. Richard Sterling emerged from his corner office, his expensive suit and confident stride announcing his authority before he spoke. "Mrs. Ashford, what seems to be the trouble this morning?" he asked with professional courtesy tinged by mild irritation at the disruption. "These urgent calls about my husband's trust," Mrs. Ashford replied, clutching a manila envelope. "They claim there are immediate legal requirements I've somehow missed." The caller knew personal details about my finances. Sterling frowned, his legal mind processing the information. "We have no Attorney Johnson on staff, Mrs. Ashford. Someone appears to be impersonating our firm. This sounds like a scam targeting elderly clients." Marcus took a step forward, his protective instincts overriding years of staying invisible. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling, but my daughter took a call last night that sounds connected to this situation." Sterling's gaze shifted to Marcus with barely concealed annoyance. "This is a sensitive legal matter, Williams. I hardly think cleaning staff input is appropriate here." The dismissal stung, but Marcus persisted. The caller knew specific details about Mrs. Ashford's situation. This might be more sophisticated than a typical scam. Emma approached Mrs. Ashford, while Sterling retreated to make phone calls about the impersonation. Marcus remained nearby, pretending to organize magazines while listening intently to every word exchanged between his daughter and the worried woman. "Mrs. Ashford," Emma said with the directness that only children possessed, "the man who called last night said your husband died last year. But you told me it was 3 years ago when you showed me that picture in your wallet." Victoria looked down at Emma with surprise, then genuine warmth. "You remember that conversation, dear?" "Yes, Robert passed 3 years ago this December." The caller got that detail completely wrong. Emma nodded seriously, her mind working through the inconsistencies like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. "He also said you needed to sign trust modifications for tax reasons. Do you usually handle financial stuff through phone calls like that?" Mrs. Ashford shook her head firmly. "Never. My attorney always meets with me in person for important documents. Robert taught me to never make financial decisions under pressure, especially over the phone. But these callers made it sound so urgent, like I would lose everything if I didn't act immediately." Marcus felt his old investigative instincts sharpen as he listened to the conversation. The pressure tactics, the false urgency, the mix of accurate and inaccurate personal information all pointed to a sophisticated fraud operation targeting wealthy elderly clients. Emma continued her innocent interrogation. "Did they ask you to bring cash or wire money somewhere specific?" Victoria paused, her expression growing more troubled. "They mentioned something about expediting fees and having cashier's checks ready for immediate processing. They said normal banking procedures would take too long given the tax deadline." From across the lobby, Marcus caught Emma's eye and nodded slightly, a signal they had developed over their 2 years working together. Emma understood her father's silent communication and pressed forward with her questions. "Mrs. Ashford," Emma asked thoughtfully, "has anyone else gotten calls like this? Maybe other ladies from your bridge club or book group?" Victoria's eyes widened with sudden realization. "Actually, yes. Margaret Hawkins mentioned something similar last week. She seemed very upset about urgent financial papers." That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the office couch, Marcus sat at an unused desk in the firm's library. The cleaning supplies sat forgotten in his cart as he pulled out a small notebook and began writing down everything Emma had told him about the phone call, cross-referencing it with Mrs. Ashford's morning revelations. The methodical approach came naturally, muscle memory from 15 years of corporate fraud investigation. Marcus opened his phone and began searching databases he still had access to through professional contacts who hadn't forgotten his former expertise. The phone number Emma had written down led to a virtual phone service registered to a shell company in Nevada. Marcus traced the registration through several layers of corporate ownership, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Each search revealed another breadcrumb in a sophisticated operation designed to appear legitimate while remaining untraceable. He cross-referenced the tax law claims the callers had made, pulling up actual IRS regulations and estate planning requirements. The supposed deadline the scammers had created didn't exist in federal tax code. Trust modifications rarely required emergency action, and legitimate attorneys never demanded cashier's checks for processing fees. Marcus found himself slipping back into the analytical mindset that had once made him one of the most respected fraud investigators in the corporate world. The pattern emerging from his research showed a carefully orchestrated scheme targeting wealthy widows across multiple states, using personal information gathered from obituaries, social media, and public records. The sophistication troubled him. This was an amateur hour phone scamming. Someone with real knowledge of estate law and financial systems had designed this operation to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of grieving spouses who might be handling complex finances alone for the first time. As he worked, Marcus felt the familiar rush of connecting dots, building cases, protecting potential victims. It was the same drive that had fueled his career before everything changed. Before choosing Emma's needs over professional recognition had redefined his priorities. His phone buzzed with a text from an old colleague at the Financial Crimes Division. The number Marcus had forwarded matched 3 other reports they had received in the past month, all involving elderly women and urgent trust modifications. Richard Sterling arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning, finding Marcus still at the library desk with research materials spread across the polished wood surface. The senior partner's expression shifted from surprise to irritation as he took in the scene. "Williams, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Sterling demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone unaccustomed to being questioned by staff. Marcus looked up from his notebook, carefully closing it while maintaining eye contact with his employer. "I was researching the phone scam targeting Mrs. Ashford. I believe she's in more danger than you realize." Sterling's jaw tightened as he moved closer to the desk, his expensive cologne mixing with the lingering scent of cleaning supplies. "You're a janitor, Williams. Your job description doesn't include playing detective with our client affairs." The dismissal stung more than Marcus expected, but he held his ground. "Mrs. Ashford could lose her life savings if we don't act quickly. This isn't some amateur phone scam. These people know details about our finances that shouldn't be publicly available." Sterling picked up one of the printed pages Marcus had left on the desk, scanning the information with professional skepticism. "Even if your concerns have merit, this is a matter for proper authorities, not cleaning staff. I won't have employees overstepping their boundaries." Marcus felt the familiar tension between protecting someone and protecting his carefully constructed anonymity. Revealing his background would validate his concerns, but potentially complicate the stable life he had built for Emma. "I understand your position, Mr. Sterling," Marcus said carefully, "but Mrs. Ashford trusts Emma. She might share information with my daughter that she wouldn't tell anyone else. Sometimes the most valuable intelligence comes from unexpected sources." Sterling set down the papers with deliberate force. "Your daughter is a child, not a trained investigator. I'm instructing you to drop this matter immediately and focus on your actual responsibilities. If Mrs. Ashford needs protection, she can hire proper security consultants." The conversation ended with Sterling's dismissal, but Marcus noticed the senior partner pocketing the research papers rather than throwing them away. Emma found Mrs. Ashford in the firm's waiting area the following afternoon, clutching another manila envelope and looking increasingly distressed. The elegant woman's composure was cracking under the relentless pressure of urgent phone calls. They called again this morning. Mrs. Ashford confided to Emma, her voice barely above a whisper. They said I only have until Friday to sign these papers, or I'll lose my house and Robert's pension benefits. Emma settled beside Mrs. Ashford on the leather couch, her homework forgotten. Mrs. Ashford, can I ask you something kind of personal? How did they know about your husband's pension? Did you ever tell anyone about it over the phone? Victoria paused, thinking carefully about Emma's question. I might have mentioned it to someone claiming to be from the pension office last month. They said they were updating beneficiary information and needed to verify details. Emma's eyes widened with understanding. Did they ask you to confirm information like your address, your husband's social security number, maybe your bank details? Mrs. Ashford nodded slowly, her face growing pale. They knew some details already, but asked me to verify others for their records. They sounded so official, so professional. Oh my goodness, I think I gave them everything they needed. From across the room, Marcus continued his cleaning routine while listening intently. Emma's natural ability to ask the right questions was uncovering the full scope of the identity theft operation. Emma reached over and took Mrs. Ashford's hand. Mrs. Ashford, my dad taught me that real companies never ask you to verify information over the phone that they should already have. If they really had your file, why would they need you to tell them stuff they already know? Victoria squeezed Emma's small hand gratefully. Your father raised you to be very smart, dear. I wish I had thought to ask those questions before I answered theirs. Emma glanced toward her father, who gave her an encouraging nod. Mrs. Ashford, have you told Mr. Sterling about all these different phone calls? The pension office, the lawyer calls, all of them together. No, Mrs. Ashford admitted. I thought they were separate issues. But now that you mention it, they all started around the same time. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his old contact list, numbers he hadn't dialed in 3 years, and began reaching out to former colleagues in financial crimes investigation. The responses came quickly, validating his instincts about the operation's sophistication. Detective Sarah Chun from the fraud division called back within an hour. Marcus, I can't believe it's really you, she said warmly. We've been tracking a multi-state operation that matches exactly what you described. These people have stolen over $2 million from elderly victims in the past 6 months. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as Chun shared details about the criminal network. They're using a combination of social engineering, identity theft, and legal impersonation that's incredibly sophisticated. They researched their targets for months, building detailed profiles before making contact. The investigation had identified at least 15 victims across 7 states, all wealthy widows between ages 65 and 85. The scammers used obituaries and social media to gather initial information, then posed as various authority figures to extract additional personal details. Chun continued, they're not just stealing money, Marcus. They're filing false legal documents, creating fake trust modifications, even impersonating court officials. This is organized crime with serious legal knowledge behind it. Marcus shared everything Emma had discovered through her conversations with Mrs. Ashford, describing the pension office call, the fake emergency deadlines, and the pressure tactics. Chin took detailed notes, recognizing patterns that connected to their broader investigation. We need someone on the inside to help us build a solid case, Chin explained. Someone with investigative experience who can document their methods and gather evidence. Are you interested in consulting on this? Marcus looked across the empty law office toward the couch where Emma slept peacefully, her homework still spread across the coffee table. The decision would mean risking their quiet, stable life, but Mrs. Ashford and countless other victims needed protection. I'll do whatever it takes to stop them, Marcus replied quietly. But my daughter's safety comes first. If this gets dangerous, I'm out. Friday morning arrived with a crisis that shattered the careful balance Marcus had maintained between protection and anonymity. Victoria Ashford burst through the law firm's entrance at 8 sharp, her usual composure completely gone, replaced by panic that radiated through the marble lobby. They're demanding I meet them at the bank in 2 hours, she announced breathlessly to the receptionist. They say if I don't bring certified checks totaling $400,000, they'll freeze all my assets and file criminal charges for tax evasion. Marcus emerged from the supply closet, where he had been pretending to inventory cleaning supplies while actually monitoring the situation. Emma sat at her usual spot on the couch, homework abandoned as she watched Mrs. Ashford with growing concern. Sterling appeared from his office, drawn by the commotion. His professional demeanor couldn't quite mask his irritation at having his morning disrupted again. "Mrs. Ashford, we've discussed this. These are scammers. You should simply ignore their calls." "But they knew my banking information," Victoria protested, her voice rising with desperation. "They mentioned specific account numbers, investment details that only my financial advisor should know. How could scammers have access to such private information?" Marcus watched Sterling dismiss Victoria's fears with the casual indifference of someone who had never been truly vulnerable. The senior partner's privilege blinded him to the sophisticated nature of the threat, and his dismissal was pushing Victoria toward making a devastating mistake. The moment of truth arrived when Victoria turned toward the door, her purse clutched tightly in trembling hands. "I have to go to the bank," she said with defeated resignation. "I can't risk losing everything Robert left me." Marcus felt 3 years of careful invisibility colliding with his fundamental inability to watch innocent people get hurt. Emma looked up at him from across the lobby, her young face reflecting complete trust in her father's judgment. "Mrs. Ashford," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an authority that made Sterling whip around in surprise. "You're not going anywhere. Those people are professional criminals, and I can prove it." The authority in Marcus's voice stopped Victoria mid-stride, her hand frozen on the glass door handle. Sterling's face flushed with anger at his janitor's public contradiction, but Marcus stepped forward with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being heard and believed. "Mrs. Ashford, what you're describing is called synthetic identity fraud combined with elder financial abuse," Marcus explained calmly. "The criminals spent months researching your background, using obituary information, social media posts, and public records to build a complete profile of your financial situation." Victoria turned slowly, her desperate expression shifting to curious attention as Marcus continued with professional precision. "They contacted you first as the pension office to verify information they already suspected, then use your responses to make their lawyer impersonation more convincing. Each interaction gave them additional details to make the next contact seem more legitimate." Sterling interrupted sharply. "Williams, this is completely inappropriate. You're way out of line here." Marcus ignored his employer, focusing entirely on Victoria's safety. "The tax deadline they created doesn't exist in federal law. Trust modifications never require emergency cashier's checks. Real attorneys don't demand immediate payment for processing fees. Everything they told you violates standard legal and banking procedures." Victoria moved closer, studying Marcus with new recognition. "You know about these things professionally, don't you? This isn't just good instincts or lucky guesses." Marcus nodded, feeling Emma's proud gaze from across the lobby. "I spent 15 years investigating corporate and financial fraud before my wife got sick. I specialized in cases exactly like yours, protecting victims from sophisticated criminal networks." Sterling's anger escalated to outrage. "You lied on your employment application. You're supposed to be a night janitor, not some kind of undercover investigator." "I never lied," Marcus replied steadily. "I am a night janitor. It's honest work that lets me be present for my daughter. But my previous experience doesn't disappear just because I chose different priorities." Victoria reached out and grasped Marcus's hand gratefully. "Thank you for risking your job to protect me. How do we stop them?" Detective Sarah Chun arrived at Sterling, Cross and Associates 20 minutes later, her badge and confident stride immediately commanding the lobby's attention. She surveyed the scene with professional assessment before her eyes landed on Marcus, and her expression shifted to genuine warmth mixed with respect. "Marcus Williams," Chun said with unmistakable admiration. "When dispatch told me you were involved in this case, I drove here personally. You're a legend in financial crimes investigation. Sterling's face went pale as the detective's words sank in. The senior partner looked between Marcus and Chun with growing comprehension of how badly he had misjudged his night janitor's qualifications. Chun turned to Victoria with reassuring authority. Mrs. Ashford, you're incredibly fortunate that Marcus and his daughter intercepted this scam. We've been tracking this criminal network for 8 months, and they've successfully stolen over $2 million from victims across multiple states. Emma beamed with pride from her spot on the couch as Chun continued. The intelligence Marcus gathered through his investigation gave us the final pieces we needed to identify the entire operation. His analysis of their methods was flawless, exactly the quality work I remember from our cases together. Marcus felt the familiar satisfaction of protecting innocent people, the same drive that had defined his career before personal priorities shifted his path. But Detective Chun, the real credit goes to Emma. Her instincts about that first phone call and her questions to Mrs. Ashford uncovered details that experienced investigators might have missed. Chun smiled at Emma with genuine respect. Your daughter has natural investigative talent. Marcus, her ability to ask the right questions and notice inconsistencies probably saved Mrs. Ashford's entire estate. Sterling stepped forward hesitantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by uncomfortable recognition. Detective Chun, I owe Marcus an apology. I had no idea about his background or expertise. Victoria squeezed Marcus's arm gratefully. How can I ever thank you and Emma for protecting me from losing everything Robert worked so hard to build? The answer, Marcus knew, wasn't about gratitude or recognition. It was about using his gifts to help others while building the stable, loving life Emma deserved. 1 month later, Marcus sat in the same law firm library where he had once researched Victoria's case in secret, but now his presence commanded respect rather than dismissal. Victoria Ashford had personally funded a new fraud prevention consulting position, insisting that Marcus split his time between investigation work and his chosen night schedule that prioritized Emma's needs. Sterling approached with genuine humility, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Marcus, I wanted to apologize again for how I treated your concerns. Your expertise saved not just Mrs. Ashford, but potentially dozens of other victims as Detective Chen's investigation expands. Marcus accepted the coffee graciously. We all make assumptions based on appearances, Mr. Sterling. What matters is being willing to change when presented with new information. Emma burst through the library doors after school, her backpack bouncing as she ran to hug her father. Dad, Mrs. Chun called and said they arrested the whole criminal network using the evidence you helped gather. She wants to know if I want to visit the police station and see how fraud investigations work. Marcus smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, remembering his own excitement about justice and protection that had originally drawn him to investigative work. The difference now was the balance he had found between professional fulfillment and family priorities. Victoria appeared in the doorway, elegant as always, but now radiating the confidence of someone who had survived a serious threat. Marcus, the other ladies from my bridge club want to hire you as a consultant to review their financial security. It seems word is spreading about your unique combination of expertise and genuine caring. Marcus looked around the room at the faces of people who now saw him clearly, valued his contributions, and respected his choices. But his greatest pride came from Emma's beaming smile, knowing that she had played a crucial role in protecting someone vulnerable. The night janitor position remained his primary job by choice, ensuring their stable routine and his presence during Emma's important years. But now his days also included meaningful work that used his gifts to help others. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment about your favorite moment, or if you've ever witnessed hidden talents in someone others underestimated.